My name's Guy Felicella, and I'm a former drug user who had to be brought back to life 6 times. I wouldn't be alive today without harm reduction, and I definitely wouldn't have over a decade of sobriety without the recovery that I have today. The first time I met Gabor, I'd seen him at Detox, and he dropped that bomb into my life where he said, I don't think your problem is the drugs. And I just was like, that's what everybody says it is. And I'm telling you, I have over a decade of sobriety today with a family and 3 beautiful kids. And I went from homeless to owning my own home. We do recover. Gabor, thanks for showing up and doing this.
No, it's a pleasure. Nice to see you again.
We'll just go get right into it. I mean, the thing that I remembered the most was, you'd see me, you'd give me a prescription at Insight, and then by the time I'd come back to get another prescription, I'd already left Insight, and this was the routine for weeks and weeks and weeks on end. And then I remember being in the room and you asking me, hey, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
And I said, yeah. And you said, hey, are you enjoying yourself? And I was like, no. And you said, I'll tell you something, Guy. I don't think your problem is the drugs.
Yeah.
I think there's a reason why you use them the way that you do.
Yeah.
And when you said, just tell me about your childhood, I just remember I just started to cry.
Yeah.
And it was like somebody dropped a bomb in my life.
Yeah.
People have always said it was the drugs.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when you ask anybody down here or anybody anywhere why they're addicted to anything, whether it's drugs or anything, you ask them not what's wrong with it, but what's right about it. So let me ask you, what did the drugs do for you that in the short term you enjoyed or you appreciated? What did they do for you?
Well, it gave me the ability to function.
Well, in what ways?
Man, so many ways. I mean, they were like comforting.
Comforting, okay.
They were, never judged me.
Okay, so they were kind of friendly?
Yeah, friendly, made me, distracted me from the way I felt.
What's happening to a person if they need to be distracted?
Oh, they're struggling.
They're struggling, they're suffering, okay. So the drugs gave you comfort, they gave you a sense of friendly acceptance, and they help soothe your suffering. Are those in themselves good things or bad things? In themselves.
Yeah, those are good things.
Those are wonderful things. In other words, the drugs weren't your problem. Your drugs were an attempt to solve a problem.
Right.
And the problem was the problem of suffering. And so to say to people, your drugs are your problem, well, the drugs, yeah, you and I both know, they create a lot of problems, but they're not the primary problem.
Right.
Primarily, they're an attempt to solve a problem. And then the next question is, well, where did the problem come from? And that's why I asked you about your childhood.
Yeah.
Because that's where it always starts. So it's really that simple.
Yeah. But what I found was interesting is when you said that, about my childhood, I didn't say anything.
Yeah.
But I just remembered things at that moment. Mm-hmm. And it was like I wouldn't let anybody in. I mean, I had this survival skill to keep people away from me. I was the angry guy.
Yeah.
And it was because I was probably more afraid for people to see me as a person who was suffering, and I wanted people to see me maybe as somebody who was strong. But
well, in your childhood, and I don't remember if I ever did know, I don't know exactly what happened to you, but in your childhood, could you afford to be vulnerable? Have people see your pain? Could you afford to do that? What would happen if you did?
Yeah, just get over it. You want something to cry about.
Yeah. So you'd be hurt even more. So that toughness, the so-called toughness, is just a defense.
Yeah.
So like everything we do is a defense, and then they blame us for the way we defend ourselves.
Right.
Like you and I talked about your ADHD, and that wasn't hard for me because I've been diagnosed with the same thing myself, so it takes one to know one,
Right.
But if you take that distractibility, then they call you stupid for it.
Yeah.
But actually, for a kid who is suffering and can't do anything about it, is it stupid to be distractible?
Right.
It's actually a self-protection.
A total protection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is a protection they call stupid?
Yeah.
you know, and they blame the kid for it. You know?
Yeah, like what, like, I mean, being called, like in school, you know, like I was the class clown, I was called, you know, the hyper difficult, hard to manage person, go to the cubicle, why can't you learn like everybody else? And my best response through all that was, I don't know. I don't know why I don't know.
But why would a kid need to be the class clown, do you think?
Well,
Which is pretty typical for ADD kids. So why would that be the case?
I mean, I made people laugh. Maybe that made me feel good.
Exactly. So all these things that you're blamed for are actually coping mechanisms. Being the class clown was your way of connecting with people.
Yeah, it was. And I liked, honestly, I enjoyed making people.
Yeah, and you probably have a sense of humor, so that's a talent you have.
Yeah.
But then you use that talent to get something that you can't ask for directly, which is just please love me.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And, you know, you develop this, you know, from years of not being able to cope with what's going on in your childhood or throughout life. So I developed this, you know, anxiety and depression. And honestly, I mean, man, when I'd make a mistake, like I'd seriously want to end my life. That's how big mistakes were to me. So it was almost like
even now?
Not now.
Yeah.
But now I can make a mistake and understand this is a learning experience.
Yeah.
But back then, making a mistake, it just comes with a whole bunch of chaos.
Yeah.
Like, look at you now, look what you've done. You know, and you hear all these, you know, I thought verbal abuse in my life was the worst form of abuse. I'd rather get beaten up than to be attacked verbally because it was so crushing inside.
Well, it evokes a lot of shame, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And shame is just the worst mind state there is. It's like you don't belong on the earth.
Yeah, I mean, it's still too, you know, even in some circumstances, shame reappears every once in a while.
Yeah, it happens for me as well.
Oh yeah, well, it's good to know that I'm not the only one.
Yeah, no. Especially if I believe that two things. One is that I made a mistake, and two is that makes me look bad in the eyes of others.
Yeah.
Now I'm much quicker to forgive myself or to even realize there's nothing to forgive, you know. Human beings make mistakes, what's the big deal? But that combination can still sometimes evoke some shame in me, you know. Yeah,
it's like sometimes too, it's like, you know, it triggers something inside you, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't feel the way I used to feel, but I still have challenges sometimes with the way I feel.
Yeah. So as part of your way out of here, did you at some point get counseling or anything, or how did you do it?
Yeah, you know, once I was diagnosed, and then I started getting EMDR, trauma therapy, which really started to unravel the past. What you'd kind of started with the childhood stuff, there was stuff that was uncovered, and then dealing with sessions of trauma and counseling.
Yeah.
And even too, the great thing is that even the therapist, because it was funny because I'd show up to the therapist and she'd be like, well, how do you feel? I said, well, I feel kind of terrible that I got to come here and talk to you about everything that I haven't dealt with. And she said, yeah, welcome to the club. Everybody feels that way.
Yeah.
And she just made me relax. But going through those sessions, you know, really started to help me understand who Guy really was.
Yeah.
And once I started to understand who I was as a person, that I wasn't a bad person, that I wasn't stupid, and I wasn't all these things that people would say, you know, incorrigible or disposable or, you know, jail, he deserves to be in jail.
Yeah.
Once those lies were revealed, I started to feel better in knowing that I wasn't what people had said. You know, I think you start to believe what people tell you, especially as a young kid.
Well, you have to.
Right.
Because you can't challenge it, you know. And the other thing that's interesting is, I didn't know this until recently, but you know we have brain waves, you know, alpha waves and beta waves and so on. I think it's delta waves is that we go into when we're under hypnosis. So a good hypnotist can take a certain subject and tell them they're a duck, and the person starts
Right.
flapping their wings and quacking.
Yeah.
And they actually believe that they're a duck until the hypnotist says, okay, come back now.
Yeah.
That's because the hypnotist knows how to put your brain into this delta wave state when you're very suggestible. And the kids are in delta state for years and years and years. So whatever people tell us is like hypnosis. We believe it.
Right.
So if they tell you you're bad, you're bad.
Yeah. Yeah. I think too, when I'd gotten out of the downtown Eastside, I mean, for me, I really had to leave here.
Yeah.
Like, because I mean, I just knew, like, being brought back to life 6 times in like 9 months.
Overdoses?
Yeah. And, 2012 and 2013, and the last one that occurred at Insight. When I woke up, the nurse was crying. And I remember looking at her, her name's Sarah Gill, and I just said, why the hell are you crying? And she said, because I care. And
wow.
Man, did I start bawling. And I was just like, there's those moments that somebody exercises that humanity of caring. And I was at a really vulnerable place.
Yeah.
And I just looked at her and I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't know how to stop. And she took me upstairs to
On-site.
And then it was really a month after that, March 17th, which is St. Patrick's Day, was the last day that I'd ever used street drugs.
Wow.
And I left the downtown Eastside with one set of clothes on my back and a welfare check, and went to a recovery house in Surrey, but then had outpatient counseling and trauma counseling. And I just, started to rebuild.
So it's 10 years ago now?
Yeah, just over 10 years, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's, and even when I met my wife, and she was, you never feel worthy that people would love you, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And she loved me, and when she became pregnant with our first child, one of the biggest things for me was that I didn't want to pass on the trauma.
Yeah.
And I remember my therapist, because I'd always taken responsibility for the stuff that happened in the past. And she said, you are not responsible for the trauma that you endured. However, you are responsible in making sure that doesn't get passed on.
Exactly.
And I accepted that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was freeing.
Well, not only that, think about it this way. What would it have meant for you if your parents had taken that on before you were born?
Oh. Breaking curses.
Yeah. So it's like, what a gift, right? You're giving to your children. And it's not that you're going to be, I don't imagine you're perfect at it.
No.
but what a gift, hey?
Yeah.
And there's this chain, and every generation forms a link in the chain. And you basically said, I'm going to break the link. I'm going to break this chain of transmission of trauma.
Yeah. Yeah. I tell people this. I said, you know what? Looking back on my life of drugs and substances and pain and trauma, the easiest thing out of all of that was getting off the drugs. The hardest thing was changing how I dealt with my life and how I felt about myself as a person. And that's the stuff that I still work on today.
Yeah.
But man, oh man, I see why a lot of people don't get the help and support that they need, because it's too painful.
Well, that's just crazy. So we met, back about 14, 15 years ago?
Yeah, maybe even, a little bit longer maybe.
Okay,
yeah.
All right. How old were you by then? Roughly?
Yeah, like 30.
Okay. And how many years have you been a user?
Since I was 12.
Okay. So you were a user for what, 16 to 18 years?
Yeah.
Okay. This is what's nuts. How come nobody asked you what I asked you? It's not remarkable that I asked you that. What's remarkable is that nobody else had.
Yeah.
All the drug counselors and the doctors you'd seen, addiction specialists, I don't know, imagine parole officers, I don't know, nurses.
Yeah.
How come? And that's what's so crazy, because there's all this science and evidence and information linking childhood suffering to addiction later on, and how all that affects the brain and the personality, and it gives the people the pain that they're trying to run away from with the drug use. And it's like most treatment professionals are like completely oblivious.
Yeah.
And it's not their fault. It's systemic. The system, the schools don't teach them. Maybe it's changing now. Yeah. But very slowly.
It's still, you're right, you're absolutely right. It's still, can't access trauma therapy unless you have, a job or money or benefits. So for, look at down here where I see people struggling.
Yeah.
We basically don't offer trauma therapy or counseling to people who would need it the most. And if you live in poverty or you're homelessness, I mean, like how you can't, I remember it was like, man, I have to choose what am I going to choose, to numb the pain by getting high?
Yeah.
Or what?
Yeah.
There's no counseling for me, there's no nothing, and everybody just says, get off the drugs and your life's going to get better. And, I was good at doing treatment.
Yeah, were you?
I was. Yeah. I could stay sober going through treatment.
Yeah.
But then nobody ever dealt with
the underlying issues.
Exactly. And so I wasn't good at doing life.
Yeah.
And I described that to people. It was like, whether I was in jail, whether I was in treatment facility, I could stay off the drugs while I was in there. There was some structure involved. I distracted myself by doing other things.
Yeah.
But the minute I got out, right back to the downtown Eastside.
Yeah.
And you can look at the systems of care that we have when you get, jail isn't about rehabilitation, it's about incarceration.
Yeah.
And then they drop you off at a bus stop homeless with a welfare check and say, good luck. Yeah. And you're just like, well, gee, thanks, And so you go back into, and we just, in our society, people are trying to break free, but we just keep leaving them there or putting them back there.
Well, they call it a correctional system.
Yeah.
But it doesn't correct anything.
Nothing, yeah.
In fact, in many ways, for a lot of people, it makes it worse.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's no, you get in there too, it's a different world, right? Compared to, you're not vulnerable, you're always, your mental health is, you're just in survival mode, right?
Yeah.
It's almost similar to being out on the street, homeless. I mean, sure, you have a couple things, you have a bed and you have somebody bringing you meals, but other than that, it's the same survival set. They just transfer it from the street into a prison system. And then they release you, and then everybody shames you for doing the same things over and over again.
Yeah.
And you're like, but you guys are not helping me get through, right?
And what I've seen, certainly in the States, in a couple of prisons, San Quentin and elsewhere, when programs come into the prisons with some sense of compassion and understanding, and they help people deal with their traumas, some of the most hardened criminals become the softest and most open and most loving and also, genuinely remorseful people,
Yeah.
And all they want to do is do good in the world after that.
Yeah.
So it's not because people are incorrigible, it's because the system, for the most part, doesn't offer them. These are volunteer programs.
Right.
And volunteers come in, and it's great, but it's not systemic, it's just episodic, and so very few people have access to it.
Yeah, which is sad in our state of affairs. Look at now with the poison drug supply. Like, why can't people get it right?
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So I left here 11 years ago, now 12 years ago. Whenever I visit down here, it seems noticeably more hostile and aggressive. Somehow it seems more tense. Do you know what's happened here? Like, what's driving that? Do you know?
Well, I think part of it is obviously the drug supply that's gotten so toxic. It's not that's the part of it when you have xylazine and benzodiazepines in the system of people. I mean, and people not knowing that they're consuming this, and then all of a sudden getting dependent on that. But I also think too, like, you can go back even a little bit further. I think a lot of it's changed of how it was. It was more like somewhat of a brotherhood. People looked after each other down here. And not to say that that doesn't happen to some extent,
Yeah.
but it sure didn't. People don't look out for each other
No, yeah.
like they did before. And I think that's the reason is because of desperation in people's lives. I think, when desperation can either be a gift or it can be your worst enemy.
Yeah.
And it just depends on what part of desperation you're at. And so, being desperate is one thing, but not being able to be supported while being desperate is a curse.
Yeah.
And you react.
Yeah.
And I think down here we have, so many programs, but yet at the same time, I just think, people are distracting themselves from the sadness. And I think that's, notable and a reasonable response.
Yeah.
And it's not like everybody's chaotic or violent. I mean,
Yeah.
sure you have some really good people. I mean, I know so many who, even when I was down here,
Yeah.
they're still here.
Yeah.
And just to see them, it's saddening because, they're hunched over now or they're in pain. And,
What happens for them when you see them?
oh, I just had a guy 2 weeks ago, a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
We were just talking, he starts crying, and I was like, what the hell are you crying for? And he goes, well, you give me hope, man.
Oh, wow.
And I was just like, oh, give me a hug. And,
Yeah.
he's like, dude, man, and I think what happens was as people remember how much I struggled.
Yeah.
And so when they see that with their own eyes, I think it goes to show that, we do get out and, some of the stuff that I do in the community trying to help people. And,
Yeah.
I love the people down here.
Yeah.
I always have, always will.
I did too.
Yeah. Yeah, well, obviously, this is one of the things I always said. I was like, in a time, especially back then,
Yeah.
we were treated poorly.
Yeah.
But what made you the way you were? Why were you so kind?
Because I could see so much of myself in them,
Right.
I mean, they were just less fortunate than I'd been in some ways. But there's nothing about them that was different. I mean, I'm not comparing life situations. As a middle class doctor with a good income and
Right.
family and all this, success and all this stuff, By the time I worked down here, I'd already had written at least one book, and but the hunger, the pain, and then the reactions to that, the addictive patterns, and the manipulation,
Right.
the lying and the cheating at the same time, people being kind to. I could just relate to all that. They were just people,
Yeah.
So I could really see myself in them. I think that was the big difference. I didn't see a distinction. I mean, there were the class distinctions, and obviously they had deeper mental health issues than I faced, and they've had more trauma than I faced, and they had, physical illness and all, So I'm not saying it was the same, but the similarities were very interesting to me.
Right.
The similarities were much more interesting than the differences.
Yeah.
So that's what it was, I think.
Yeah. Just relatable.
It's all relatable, yeah. Also, you know what? People down here, they don't pretend to be other than who they are.
Yeah.
I mean, in that sense, they lie and cheat all the time.
Yeah.
Like, I remember one time a guy stole my cell phone. This guy really liked me and respected me, but he was my patient,
Right.
And he leaves, and I noticed my cell phone was missing. So I closed the office. I said, I'll be back in half an hour. And I came down to the Regent Hotel, I think, or the Washington, where he was staying. I went to his room. He says, I want my cell phone back. He says, what cell phone?
Yeah.
I said, I know you took my cell phone. I want it back. I'll give it back to you tomorrow. I said, no, you're going to give it back to me right now. He says, I can't, it's already in the pawn shop. I said, great, let's go to the pawn shop.
Yeah.
The pawn shop. We go to the pawn shop. It was a pawn shop here, just down the corner,
Right.
on Hastings. And the guy says, I got to get the cell phone back. The owner is here.
Yeah.
And the pawn shop owner says, why didn't you tell me it was stolen? Oh my, what a big surprise.
Yeah.
Anyway, then I said to the guy afterwards, the next time I saw him, I said, look, I know you respect and like me. Why the hell did you steal my stuff? He says, what am I going to do, Doc? I'm an addict.
Yeah.
Like, there's no There's no pretense.
Yeah, opportunity.
Opportunity, yeah, of course he's going to steal it.
I know. I say the same thing to my wife when we come down here. Sometimes I'll be like, no, put the bag in the thing. And she's like, it's just a makeup bag.
Yeah.
And I said, I'll tell you something about that makeup bag. That's $10,000 in that makeup bag to somebody that's walking by the car.
Yeah.
She looks at me and she's like, oh, okay, and then put it away. But I mean, you have to understand that life.
Yeah.
To somebody that's outside of that, they just, they don't get it, right?
So there was something refreshing about just the upfront.
Right, just like, hey, this is what I do.
This is what I do.
Yeah, I remember when we were at CTCT, just actually a half block from here at the Stanley.
Yeah.
I remember being transferred there from the hospital, and it was me and a girl were the first two people there. You were the doctor there.
Yeah.
And I remember because I'd had this bone infection in my leg for...
You were the first two there?
Yeah.
I didn't remember that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And Monica Stein was there.
Oh,
and,
yeah, of course.
Jeff West was, and Sarah Evans, and all of them. Anyway,
Yeah.
And I remember you saying to me, you were like, okay, listen, this is serious. You've had this bone infection for months and you're not getting your antibiotics because you keep leaving the hospital. I was like, I'm not leaving the hospital. They keep kicking me out of the hospital. And I remember what you said to me. You were like, how do I make sure that you are here? Listen, I don't care what you do outside.
Yeah.
You go do all the dope you want.
Yeah.
But how do I make it that you come back here every 4 hours for the next 8 weeks?
Yeah.
You're staying here, you're living here, but how do we make this work?
Yeah.
And I said to you, I can't be in withdrawal. And you were like, okay, let's work on that. And and obviously you were giving me quite a lot of stuff, which back then I know doctors' regulations and what you can do, but I always share this with people. I was like, you had a good way of balancing your practice, but also understanding that I have to do this harm reduction approach with this guy.
Yeah.
Because he's going to lose his leg.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, let's do it, done deal. And I remember I was always there every 4 hours to get the antibiotics.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so I just remembered your philosophy of how you were. It was almost like, we were playing a chess game and it was kind of like negotiable.
Yeah. Well, in this case, not that I recall any of this, but it sounds familiar, The only game was, how do we save your leg?
That's it.
Everything else was, you're always going to use. So the question is, are you going to use in a way that's going to help us salvage your leg, or are you going to use in a way that's going to help you lose your leg?
Yeah.
That was the only game.
Yeah. I remember the doctor at St. Paul's, and he they just gave me such a hard time back then.
Yeah.
And I remember him saying to me, look, we give you the morphine, we give you the breakthroughs, we give you the sleeping pills, we give you everything to address, your withdrawals. And I described it to him like this. I said, yes, the drugs that you give me address the physical pain, but I said the heroin addresses the emotional pain that I have inside.
That's right.
And asking me to give that up is like, I could rather move to the Himalayan mountains and become a shepherd, because that's not possible. And I just remember him saying that at that time, he says, well, then the antibiotics don't work on your leg, and he discharged me. And then I came back to Insight, and they were all outraged because they brought me back to the hospital, and they were like, you can't discharge a man that has an osteomyelitis bone infection. And I remember the hospital saying he self-discharged. But it wasn't true.
Yeah.
But it's almost like the same thing. It's like, well, who are they going to believe? They're going to believe a doctor?
Yeah.
Or are they going to believe this, dirty drug user?
Yeah.
And they took me back, but that's when CTCT was created a short time later.
Yeah, which is a brilliant idea.
Brilliant.
I wish it had been mine. but it was a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
What a concept,
I know.
Actually allowing people to use and take care of them, just making sure that their infection is healed. Because let's face it, what's the outcome? What's the worst case scenario?
Yeah.
There's no downside in doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm just, this is the leg, I had 5 osteomyelitis bone infections in my life, and 4 were in this leg, and 1 was in my lower back.
Oh gosh.
And I'm telling you, man, like, you know, how you overcome all this stuff, like that's traumatic even.
Yeah.
So it was just like, I always look back now and I say to myself, the stuff that I had to go through as a young kid,
Yeah.
I mean, was really preparing me for the biggest battles of my life of what I was going to go through.
Yeah, but they also made the battles necessary.
Right. Yes. Yeah, they did. Yeah. And you just, you know, as a kid, when I look back, I mean, you know, like I wasn't the most talented sports player, but
Yeah.
as a kid,
Yeah.
but you know what, I remember coaches always saying, this guy's, there's no quitting in him.
Yeah, yeah.
And to me, you know, he's got heart. He won't give up. So he's a team player, and you know, when you kind of hear those things in your life, it always felt good for that. But from my family, you know, I just never got any of that, and so it was rather, I was always getting bits of it from other people. And I've often said this in my whole life. There's been people have come through my life at the right moment, at the right time.
Yeah.
And it's just like they were put there for a reason. And I can count them all.
There's an old saying that when the student is ready, the teacher will show up.
Yeah. Yes.
Tell me, are you in touch with your family?
I am. I actually, which is really interesting, is that I have a really good relationship with my dad, which, you know, my mom and I don't talk to just for dysfunctional reasons. This is not good. So, but with my dad, who was probably the you know, one of the, you know, the biggest parts of the trauma.
Yeah.
And he doesn't speak much English.
Oh, he doesn't. Are you guys Italian or?
Yeah, Italian. Yeah, and we haven't really. We still, the same way as I grew up, we haven't talked about anything.
Yeah.
However, when we did reconnect, I see the way he plays with his I have 3 kids.
Yeah, the grandkids.
Yeah.
He's probably a much better grandfather than he was as a father.
Oh,
everybody is, by the way.
It's just unbelievable. But the way I see him he's on the floor with the kids. He's playing cards with them, talking to them. They're talking to him, and they don't really understand him either, but they love him. And I look at it and I say to myself, you know, I wish I had, that's what I wished for, that I had, but at the same time, just to see the way he is with them.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah, it's like, it's healing.
Good for him.
Yeah, and so I feel like I'm in a trauma therapy session right now.
No, you're just telling me about your life.
Yeah, and but it's really powerful just because, you know, they know him as, you know, No, and they love talking. You know, when we're going over there, they're all happy. And for me, that's the gift of forgiveness. I think, you know, from in my life, I think I needed to be forgiven for a lot of stuff that I'd done, and so.
Did you ever know what happened to him to make him the way he was?
I did.
Yeah.
When I heard that, I thought he was born and raised in Naples.
Yeah.
He's the youngest of like...
Naples is a tough city.
Tough town, yeah. Well, he had to go out in a field. He didn't want to work there. He had to work as a kid, you know. He's getting beaten, you know, being forced to do things. I mean, he escaped there to come here. Yeah. And I think, you know, with all that, I don't know further down the road from him the other trauma that was endured, but I could obviously, you know, you understand, when you understand your own traumas and pains and how you get through it, then it's easy to see other people's traumas and pains and say, you know what, this is what happens. He didn't have the ability to break that chain, right? Yeah. And I think as time goes on, I think as the world changes or the right person comes in your life and lets you in on something that you had no knowledge of. That's right. You are able to look at it through a different lens. And so for him, I mean, we haven't talked about nothing that's happened in the past, but I just let it go and be like, you know what, it's just better this way. But I've been healed in the sense that I forgive him. When he sees me, he's so proud. Is he? Yeah. And you know what? Italians don't apologize for nothing. You know how they apologize? No. They say that they're proud of you.
Oh, that's good.
But they don't say that they're sorry.
Yeah.
Like, he won't say he's sorry. He'll just hug you and say he's proud of you.
That's wonderful.
And so for me, that's him saying sorry. So it's done in a different way.
Yeah.
But to me, that's, and I know other cultures, it's funny, my friend is, she's Chinese, and she says the same thing. Oh yeah, that, because I share that with her, and she's like, oh, that's like my dad, he's proud of you. I mean, but it's really what they're trying to say. It makes you feel good, you know?
That's great to hear.
What are we doing down here? Like, what do you think needs to happen with people struggling? What do you see? What do you think needs to?
Well, look, back sometime maybe 20 years ago or less, the Globe and Mail newspaper organized this big conference about how do we solve the problem of the downtown Eastside.
Right.
And all these big academic brains came and nattered on about how do you know, and I thought, this is nonsense.
Yeah.
There's no problem of the downtown Eastside. There's the problem of Canada.
Right.
There's a problem of a system that traumatizes a lot of people, particularly Indigenous people. I mean, large percentage of people down here, you know, but others, and a school system that doesn't understand these traumatized kids, like you.
Yeah.
Then a punitive justice system that further torments people.
Yeah.
And then a legal system that illegitimizes certain drugs.
Right.
So people have to engage in criminal activity.
Yeah.
And then a medical system, the average medical student, this is unbelievable, but it's true to this day. Here at UBC, where I trained, or you spoke to a bunch of medical students, psychiatrists at University of Toronto, they never hear a single lecture on trauma.
Wow.
In all the years of education.
Yeah.
So that's what creates the problem. Not to mention tremendous inequality, which is always a source of dysfunction in society and poverty. And so what needs to be happened down here, it's much bigger than what's need to happen down here. The laws need to be changed.
Yeah.
The correctional system needs to be changed. The educational system needs to be informed about trauma. The medical profession needs to be educated about the actual science linking trauma and addiction, trauma and mental health, and brain development and trauma.
Yeah.
You know, in other words, a whole lot of things would have to change.
Yeah.
So by the time people get down here, it's like, what kind of Band-Aids can we apply to their wounds? But how to heal their wounds, there's barely time to even think about it down here.
Yeah. No time.
You know?
Yeah.
So I don't see the downtown east side in isolation from the culture and the society and medical, legal, educational, correctional systems.
Yeah.
They generate this. All that would have to be corrected for this to have a chance of being fixed. You know, now, housing, of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, Vancouver is getting so bloody expensive. Housing, you know. These are all systemic problems.
Yeah, and now what we have is, so we have, you know, the far right recovery advocates, which these guys are, you know, blaming, you know, harm reduction.
Yeah.
And they're saying that it enables people and that it's, you know, the thing is that oftentimes what people forget is that they're blaming harm reduction, but they're harm reduction and poverty and homelessness and inequality they're all they're different components.
Of course.
You know what I mean? But everybody looks at harm reduction, so it's created this division.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like...
I know, well, look, when Insight opened and the federal government then wanted to shut it down.
The Harper government.
Harper government, yeah. Really right-wing government. So the Senate was holding some, and they were going to bring in a law, some omnibus law that was going to make the drug laws even tougher.
Right.
So I was invited to go to Ottawa and address this committee of the Senate.
Yeah.
So because it was a conservative, a lot of conservatives in that committee and some NDP and some liberal guys. people. And I gave them all the science about brain development and trauma and all the evidence about, you know, trauma and addictions and like all the science, you know. And I said, in the light of all that, the laws that you're proposing make no sense whatsoever.
Right.
You know? And I wish I could say it was like in one ear and not the other. It wasn't even in one ear. Right. They had no capacity to hear it. Don't you agree, doctor, addiction is a bad thing? Yeah. That's what we're talking about. But we're trying to understand why it happens.
Yeah. Which is interesting that you say that, because even some of the conservatives that I know that were in addiction and struggling and they're in recovery now, they're completely against something that was around that helped them, like harm reduction, when they were using.
Yeah.
But now it's not even a concept to them. And it's like vile misinformation and very angry.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, see what happens with that division is that it doesn't inspire people who are on the street to even be attracted to something like that.
No.
Like, I mean, I say that to people. It's like, look, I don't support harm reduction over recovery or vice versa.
That's right.
I support people.
That's right.
Like, I don't care. You got to understand that in order for somebody to actually have the ability to get well, you can't be pushing them to do something that they're not ready for. And you have to accept them for where they are.
Exactly.
But people are lost.
No, they think there's a distinction. They think that somehow, I'm sure you and I are both totally in favor of abstinence.
Yeah.
Where it's possible.
It's possible.
But what are you going to do with people who are not ready for it?
Yeah.
So, I mean, the debate is so inane. Like, okay, let's close inside. Is it better for people to inject with puddle water in the back alley?
Yeah.
Or should we give them clean water?
Yeah.
Should they use dirty needles?
Yeah.
And infect themselves or others with HIV or hepatitis? Or what's the argument here?
Yeah.
You know, do they think anybody becomes an addict because there's clean needles available? You know.
Yeah.
Some kid in some beautiful home in North Vancouver says, hey, there's clean needles in the Downtown Eastside. I'm going to become a drug addict.
Yeah, no, nobody says that. But the interesting thing too, which I come up with a lot of people, is what they say is that the open drug market in the Downtown Eastside is an attraction for kids from other communities. And I'm like, no, actually, you know what? No, kids, I do a lot of talks with kids. Yeah. You know, where they're buying their drugs in their community.
That's right.
They're not coming to the Downtown Eastside to get drugs. That's the farthest thing they want to go to.
Or by the time they do come. It's out of sheer desperation.
Exactly, because they're honestly being pushed out of their community.
Right. That's right.
And this is where, you know, when I first came down here years ago as a kid, the first thing I said was, I didn't feel all alone anymore. I could see that other people were struggling. Yeah. And it became familiar and comforting to know that, even though we weren't talking about any of our stuff, but it just felt good to know that, okay, maybe I found a sense of community here. And something about that, which is when you're familiar with pain your whole life, and you're around others who are struggling with pain, it's comforting.
Yeah.
And that's what I say to people. I was like, you know, when I bring my kids down here, people yell, kids on the block. You know what that means? Put your frickin' dope away and watch your language.
Really?
Yeah. And to me,
wow.
When you see people struggling.
Yeah, and they're still.
Right?
Wow.
And my kids though, this is the interesting thing, is that they can be sitting at Pigeon Park. Eating peanut butter sandwiches. And everything's going around. Somebody's selling smoke, somebody's doing their thing over there. But they don't see that. They just see people. And they're there with their mom and their dad. And they're good. But as we get older, we get information. And then we become jaded. And we don't challenge things sometimes, right? We just accept. And so we've learned the wrong way. And the hardest part of that is unlearning that way.
I know a school principal, Christy Blakey, who sometimes brings some of her students down here.
Right.
It's quite an amazing experience for them.
Yeah, but the thing that's interesting is that
But they don't come to as voyeurs, they come to help,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, which is great. Like we used to, I mean, there's groups now in high schools that I do talks to. You know how what they all say to me? Hey, how come? What can we do? We want to do gift bags. What do you think? I said, well, in the summertime, lip balm's fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, everybody needs lip balm in the summer. So
wow.
You know, socks are always good.
Yeah.
Peanut butter sandwiches. You know, don't give a bag of peanuts because some people don't have any teeth. That doesn't work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you know, and these kids, people in our world want to help. You know, but I guess that there's a lot of, I've discovered in my life that even in a world that's full of bad, there's a lot of people doing a lot of good, so.
Let me tell you, in brief, an amazing story.
Yeah.
There's a woman called, her name is Cynthia, I think. It is. She was pregnant when I was at the Portland. So I looked after her during that pregnancy.
Right.
And she was a cocaine user along with her spouse. And she tried so hard to give up the cocaine because another child had already been taken away from her.
Right.
And she didn't want to lose this one, but she couldn't do it. So the child was taken away and adopted. This woman, Christy, this principal, at some point, and I wrote a chapter about her in my book on addiction, In the Realm of Hungry Wolves.
Right.
The chapter is called The Pregnancy Journal. So that's about her. What this principal did is, first of all, reunited her with the first daughter she'd given away, who was living in Toronto, which is an incredible story.
Wow.
And then with the second one, who was adopted by a wonderful family in the Kootenays. Now Cynthia and her spouse struggled and still used and so on. And then finally the man died, the father died, after they had at least on Zoom met because this was during COVID time, so they met on Zoom with this, by that time, wonderful 14-year-old girl.
Wow.
Who she had given birth to. After the man died, Cynthia said, every month we've been putting money away for our daughter's university education.
Wow.
So they were living on welfare, using drugs, and saving money every month. And she handed over $5,000
Wow.
for the kids' university when she graduated from high school. I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah, I can tear up with that. That's like.
Yeah, I actually had lunch with her. The principal picked her up, and we all got together, the three of us, and spoke. You know, just a few months ago.
That is just like even in the midst of all the stuff going on, still had that capacity to care and love, to do something.
That's right. Yeah.
Man, that's fantastic. Great.
Yeah. And that's what she says. She's not using anymore, and she said, "What is replaced using is love." She says.
Right.
That's what took the place of using.
Yeah, that's it, man.
Yeah.
You know, a sense of. It's similar in my life, man. It just, you know, you know what it is somebody loved me even when I didn't love myself.
Yeah.
And now today, you know, I love the person I've become, and you know, I'm surrounded by it, which is comforting.
Well, it's so wonderful to meet the person you become. It really is.
Yeah, well, it's been a long journey.
Okay, that's what life is, you know.
It is, my friend.
Have I ever told you my epitaph? You know, what I want written on my gravestone?
No.
It's going to say, it was a lot more work than I had anticipated.
Yes, I bet.
Like everybody could put that on their gravestone.
Yeah.
It was a lot more work than I had anticipated.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Doc, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, mine as well. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.